Welcome to episode 143. On today's episode, I sit down and chat with Amanda Hamilton, who is the founder of Hamilton Raye, your outsourced admins. She's going to talk to us about time tools, how and what to delegate, good communication, questions to ask when hiring an assistant, how that can keep money in your pocket, and so much more. I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Amanda. I'm excited to chat with you today.
I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So before we get into sort of the nitty gritty, tell us a little bit about your background, because it's interesting and you didn't kind of start out in this. So give everybody sort of a little snapshot of how you got here.
Yeah, I'll give you my quick snippet. So I worked in corporate retail for about 10 years. I started there out of college. I kind of worked my way through, stayed in the same organization. A lot of what I did was very project management heavy. So a lot of operational type of work and just really collaborating with a lot of different teams, et cetera. In 2018, I just made the decision that I needed to change both personally and professionally. And I decided to move from Columbus, Ohio up to Cleveland, Ohio. And at that time, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I worked a bunch of odd jobs, but one of the jobs that I was working as was a virtual assistant. And so I was working as a virtual assistant for an agency out of Georgia. And I loved the flexibility and the remote aspect of it. That was something that I was really, really looking for, just having the ability to live everywhere and make my own schedule, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I realized when I was doing a lot of that work was it was very task heavy. And so it was great and it was nice, but I ended up finding that I needed something a little bit more stimulating. And so I ended up kind of taking a similar approach, but really formulating a more elevated approach to the administrative world. So really offering smaller startup type of organizations that executive assistant level of service that, the president of Wendy's has on a consistent basis, really offering up that level of support to these smaller organizations that need it, and honestly probably need it more than most, just with the chaos, especially just starting out. So that's kind of the quick runaround.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because as I was saying, when we were off air, one of the questions that I've been seeing a lot, from our listeners is that a lot of them are feeling like, I want somebody to help me with this, because I don't want to necessarily hire somebody on full time because I don't need that type of help, but they're still feeling like I'm not getting hundreds of thousands of emails a day. So I feel like I'm just too small to be able to get this help. So what do you say about that?
I definitely think that I've always been under the mindset of making yourself look bigger than you are. And so having an administrative support to do that is wonderful. But I also think one thing that I find many, many, many people don't realize, and as they start to onboard with us, they really start to think, oh, wow, I should have used this a long time ago, is they immediately think, it's just email management or, calendar updates. But it can go so much further. Like we just brought on a recent client where we're doing a ton of research for him as he starts to build buildings in different cities. So he needs to know what types of permits are needed, just a whole range of research. And so previously he was doing all of that work and now we've taken it on for him. So even I think the thing that really being able to give yourself more time in the day, even if it's just a small menial task, will open you up, even when you are in the startup phase, will open you up to really focus more on what your, zone of genius or bread and butter is and how you want to grow your business. And in my mind, that's the way you grow. It's not continuing to do the menial stuff. You really got to delegate that out.
Well, and I was sort of reading on your website because I always love snooping as much as I possibly can before interviews. And I thought it was really interesting because you actually have a time tracking portion, which I'm going to link everybody to, of course, but on it, you talk about, it takes 2 to 5 minutes to coordinate and add a meeting. And people don't think of that kind of stuff, 7 minutes to create a social media post. That one I feel very hard. And a couple of minutes to even just read an email and even if it's a simple response. So when you sort of add all of these things up, those small tasks that you think, well, it's so small, who's going to really want to do this, really add up over time, to taking time, like you said, taking time away from your zone of genius or the stuff that actually brings you joy. Because I can tell you answering emails is not something that I'm like, woohoo, favorite time of the day.
And, I think the other thing too, it's really not even just focusing on opening up more time in your day for work things, but even more time with friends and family. I think the one thing that people tend to, when you're starting a business and really in the early stages, a lot of times friends and family kind of go to, the sidelines, unfortunately. And a lot of times, many of them understand, but really even giving you time for that and to have more of that balance for yourself as well. But I do agree, we constantly say this with our clients of, I know it only takes you 2 minutes, but that's 2 minutes every hour, every day, every month. And you really add it up and it's a ton of time over a course of a year. And you really think about what could you use that extra time for to really help yourself grow and help your business grow.
Well, and it always makes me think of every time I'm a huge dollar store fan, because I'm sort of a crafty person. And I always think it's only $1. And every time they give me the amount at the end and I'm like, $87. That didn't work out very well. Right. So I think it's the same thing with time. I actually just read, it was some sort of quote or meme or something on social media yesterday. And it said, for every, oh yeah, that's just $5, you actually have spent thousands. And it's you're like, yes, what am I doing? But agreed. It's definitely the same way. Dollars or time is money, if you ask me. And so it's really, how do you look at those similarly? But that's so funny. $87 at the dollar store. Honestly. So let's talk a little.
That's how I feel at Target.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about delegating with intention, because I think that's something, especially when someone is starting out to get some help. Delegating is a really hard thing because you're used to doing everything by yourself. And of course, sometimes we think no one's really going to be able to do this better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for us, what we typically do is we have a really robust onboarding process and we are continuing to evolve it. But I think the biggest piece that comes with delegating is trust. And the hardest piece of somebody handing things off is trusting this, random person that they're just meeting and they know just enough to be dangerous about their background, but they don't know how they work. And they come to us knowing that they trust that we are doing the right vetting and we are matching people appropriately, which is all great. But one of the things that we do in our onboarding process actually is we spend an entire week and different things happen throughout the course of the week. But one specific session that we spend time on is talking through all of the different things that we're going to start having them delegate to us in the beginning, talking through how do they like things done. And we might agree with it. And a lot of times we do, or otherwise what we'll say is, hey, we actually could do this a lot more efficiently, or let's try it this way. And I think in those types of conversations is really when that trust starts to build and people get more comfortable with our work. The other thing that we also do in that onboarding phase is we really build out standard operating procedures. And so even that, a lot of administrative work is the same, just different every day. And so how can you use like a standard process that you can lean into, reference on a consistent basis, have it documented? And that's what we really do in the beginning with the client. And we've seen a lot of success with that because the clients immediately are like, all right, this is great. What more can I give you? And that to me is really how you build those building blocks and how you kind of get moving to the next and handing more things off down the road.
Well, and I think that's, I love that you brought that up because I think that's an important thing for people to realize is that you can start off small if you're one of those people that are like, no one's going to be able to say it like I would or be able to answer an email like I would. How is somebody going to be able to do that? I can't have somebody in my head, and that becomes a fearful thing. So, starting off small and then building from that, eventually you get to a point where you're like, yeah, no, take it. You go ahead and you do it.
Yes, it's so true. I personally have a client that I work with. I've worked with him for over 2 years. And it's funny because when we first started working together, he was very nervous about giving things to me or just, I would say maybe micromanage me a little bit more. And now we actually laugh often because he's like, honestly, Amanda, you could put in my calendar, like, take a right on this street and drive off this bridge. And I probably would. Like, that's the level of trust that he has in me. And so it's just funny now, he doesn't even think twice. He just gives everything to me and I just take it from there. And I think honestly, the biggest thing and really how we've gotten there is trust. So I don't think we could have done it any other way.
Well, and I think that's, that's what you want, because I find what happens a lot of times too is that people jump around, right? They don't take the time to sort of build that trust. So then they go, well, virtual assistants just doesn't work for me because I've tried so many, and then they just don't work.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that is the case. And a lot of times in our space, we've really built out like I said, this onboarding process that allows people to do all of that in the beginning so that they don't have to feel as if they need to jump around. And then we also have, check-ins we have a client success specialist on the team, and she does a lot of that work where she'll check in with the clients. And we really, if there is an issue, communication error between the client and the admin, we have people in place to help kind of like mediate that. And a lot of times it's just a small thing that someone's along the way. And sometimes it is the client, sometimes it's the admin. I would say it's like a 50-50 on who's communicating maybe differently, or I wouldn't say incorrectly, but not effectively. And that's really where we can help bring a lot of extra value, is being that mediator. And then I honestly haven't really had a lot of experience where we've had to move admins around often. Most of the time, it's the right fit. We work through hiccups along the way and we keep moving and running. We've had a couple of instances where maybe an admin wasn't the right fit with the client for the needs. And the nice thing is we do have all these standard operating procedures built. We have profiles built, everything saved. So it's a really quick and easy transition to take one admin to another if we just find it doesn't make sense and it's the wrong fit. Versus if you're working on your own, you're having to go have that difficult conversation with somebody and then go and search and spend more time trying to find somebody else. So we really do all of that work for you. And I do think that we provide a lot of value there.
So for someone who's starting out, if they're sitting there and they're going, well, I just kind of do it all by myself. And I remember, I wasn't going to say this story. I did tell it to you beforehand, but I think it'll make sense to a lot of people. I remember when I first started out in my first accounting company, and I was small when it was just me when I first started out. But I knew that I didn't want people to always have access to me. So I created a separate email for an assistant that didn't exist, because I knew eventually I would sort of need to have somebody in that role. And so I was kind of doing one of those things where I was sort of faking it until I made it, I guess. I don't really know. I just thought that was sort of the thing to do. So I had this like fake person that people could contact, and it worked well because I could sort of pass things on. I could be busy if I needed to be busy. My assistant could just deal with it and stuff like that. But it was getting to a point where I was like, I really don't want to do this stuff. Like I really do want a person in this role to be able to do these, I don't want to say menial tasks, but to me, they were menial tasks at the time. They just took a lot of time and it wasn't something that I really enjoyed. And I realized when I needed to sort of make that shift for me was because I had a client that messaged this quote unquote assistant and asked for Christmas gift ideas because they wanted to do something special for me. And I thought, this feels so wrong. I'm this fake person. And now I'm going to talk about gifts for myself. Like I was like, oh my God, I need to do something about this. So it happened a little bit more genuine to me. But can you talk a little bit about, for the massive people who don't do that, when is a time for them that you could say, unless you're doing that, that's a good indication. But when is a good indication that this might be an avenue that you should take, is looking at getting this time of help and starting to delegate those tasks?
That's a good question. I would say as soon as you're starting to feel as though you're almost spiraling out of, I guess you probably not about to spiral out of control is probably the right way to look at it. I don't think that everybody needs somebody straight from the beginning. I think that I like the approach of having a separate, account. And even if it's not your admin per se, when I first started out, as an example, I had just a hello at Hamilton Raye email.com email. And actually, when I was interviewing people, I was emailing them to schedule interviews about joining my team from there. And I was acting as if it was this like HR person that was scheduling the interviews, but it was actually me. So similar approach to what you were doing, just a little bit different. But like I said earlier, I always think it's better to like make yourself look bigger. So I always suggest having something like that to separate, because kind of what you were experiencing, as soon as you start to feel as if you're going to spiral out of control and you're not getting to your priorities every day and you're not focused on, I'm all about the one thing, that book. I really believe in that concept, and you're not able to achieve getting to those one things every single day. That's really when you need to say, okay, what is it that I need to delegate? And stepping back and maybe, I personally like calendar and email. I'm also an admin, so that would make a lot of sense. But one place that I personally don't enjoy is social media. And so immediately I said to myself, okay, the one thing that I have got to hand off is social media. And so that's really where I started to focus. Is I honestly sat down and made a list, and I would recommend this for everybody. Sit down and make a list of like all of the things that you do every day. And I've always suggested you could even use like a time tracking tool like Harvest. We use that every day. Sit down and time yourself for a week and be pretty regimented about it and identify like, okay, I did this for a week. These are all the things that I do on a daily and weekly basis. Man, I'm working 10 to 12 hours and not realizing it. Sometimes I think if you can put it on paper and really have something to speak to, and then go through and say, okay, what are the things that I enjoy? What are the things that I don't enjoy? And really look at those. Okay, what then from there, what can I hand off and how should I approach that? Like, what's the type of role that would need to come and play? And for me specifically, it was more social media. I personally like the administrative side and I don't find it very difficult. And so that was kind of where I focused, but a lot of people just don't like to manage their calendar or don't do a good job. And that's really when it's time to, step away from that, and just get away from it. And if you're missing, phone calls from potential clients, you're not getting to emails from potential clients, red flags, absolutely bring somebody in, because as soon as you do that, you're likely going to get that next client and you're going to grow.
So let's talk a little bit about, because I think the social media thing is a big thing for people. It is for me. I hate social media. I like sitting and watching it, and I waste a lot of time, especially if I get stuck on a reel. Those stupid things suck me in. But I know that, like, for me, I'm looking at it now going, I've been handling my own social media for a while, not doing a super fantastic job at it, because it's not something that like sparks me joy. It's almost like you said, it's one of those things that it's a task. It's not something that I'm like, oh, let's do this today. It's like, it's a task and I'm just trying to get it. It feels like homework. Like when you were at school and you're like, I don't really want to do this, but I have to do this. I'll just do it and hand it in. But I know for, social media specifically, one of the things that people worry about a lot, and one of the things that I have worried about it is it's not going to sound like me. How is it going to sound like me if it's not me doing it? So do you have like a little piece? And I know it's a big topic to sort of delve into, so I just want to go into a little bit, but I know that's one of the fears, but that's one of the biggest things that people want help with or want to take off their list is having to do that.
Yeah, social media can be tough. I think as long as you find the right person, they should be able to speak in your tone of voice. We have a client on the team that we do a lot of her social media, and the one gal that works on my team that writes her social copy, we laugh all the time because she'll say, all right, I'm tapping into my Christina right now. And so she'll really like kind of center herself, like, how would she say this? And with her business, it's very niche-y, but she's really grown over the last couple of years of figuring out how to speak in her voice. Now, what I would say is it doesn't happen overnight. So that's the one thing that I always caution people of, and that's with anything delegating. I think sometimes people assume perfection from day one. And the reality is we're human and there's always a little bit of a learning curve. But I do think that the right person can absolutely come in and learn your tone, learn how you speak, how you speak to your audience, and really articulate that for you. In a social media creation and approval process, there should always be a place where, especially in the beginning, that the client is reviewing it and approving it and giving feedback. Hey, I wouldn't use that language, or I wouldn't use that tone. Let's adjust this for future. And that's really, that feedback is really how you get somebody to learn and improve and able to engage differently as you kind of grow together.
So let's talk a little bit about how to find this. Now, obviously, we would love everybody just to go to your site and to do it. But
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit first about who you take and where you take them around the world, because of course we air all around the world. But then let's talk a little bit about some tips that people can ask when they're looking for this. Are there certain questions that people can ask that will help them to make this decision a little bit easier?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how we're structured, we're a little bit different, where every one of our clients has to have a base administrative retainer to work with any of our specialists. So we do have digital marketing specialists. We have a variety of specialists, digital marketing being one of them. And our clients can tap into those individuals as long as they have a core administrative retainer with us. And we work with people around the world. So kind of a wide range. As for somebody that's going and looking for something, when it comes to social media, I always recommend have them show you previous work. Either it's an account that they've managed before, like Are they working with someone to create the graphics? I think the visual aspects of social media are so impactful, and have them show you that. What is their, talk to them about their process. How do they learn you? How do they learn your business? And I think even just asking those probing questions, if someone were to say, oh, well, I just sit down and watch your social media and that's kind of how I learn your business, that to me is a red flag. There is way more involved into kind of like getting engaged and learning what your priorities are. There should be a lot of conversations that happen in the beginning. So I think in the beginning or in the interview process, you can do a lot of that probing. So asking what's their approach to learning you and your business? But then what's their approach to building out the content, and really kind of get that understanding? Because one thing, we just recently brought on a digital marketing specialist, and one thing that I didn't even realize, she's talking to me about character count that should be used on LinkedIn versus Facebook versus Instagram. And all of those sorts of details that she and I were able to dive into made me realize, okay, she knows her stuff and she's constantly learning and then evolving her role. And so I think that's even great. But I also think making sure that you can see prior work is always wonderful, because though that right there, you can see if they fit your brand vision and what you're looking for.
And so I guess most of that would be pretty the same for someone who's just looking for administrative support too, because that can sort of be something where you don't really know the help that you need. You just know that you need some time back.
Yes, I would say for administrative work, I definitely like to kind of dig into their process. I always ask them for best tips or tricks that they use, whether for managing someone's calendar, talking through that, like what is their process? How do they do that? How do they keep themselves organized? And if someone just answers with, well, I use a notebook and a pen and paper, and don't go in any further of how they keep themselves organized, that's a big red flag to me, just because organization and communication, between those two things, you can be an incredible admin if you've got those two things hardwired. And so if there is the lack of the ability to communicate how they're able to do something, that's also a red flag, I would say. But really digging into how they keep themselves organized, but also how could they support someone else and keeping them organized as well. So just kind of spending some time understanding their tips, tricks along the way. It's been kind of funny when I've interviewed people and asked those types of questions, I've actually learned some fun tricks to incorporate into our team and our business. So that's been a lot of fun to even ask that question. Just some things that I would have never thought of, people have brought to the table. So that's been super cool.
Yeah. And that's one of my favorite things. I know, and we always ask anybody who comes on the show we sort of have these questionnaires that I get people to fill out, and some of them just have, random questions on it that I like to know. But one of the biggest obstacles that you had listed in this was actually hiring. And I connected with that because I always had that issue too. It's a process that I love doing because I learn a lot from people, but it's also one that I hate because I don't know if there's like a target on my back, but man, I have some interesting stories because I've owned retail and franchise and service industry. So I've sort of been able to I've hired everything from like high executives to like warehouse staff. And so I've had some doozy of people walking in that I was like, does this person actually exist in real? Like, did he think that was, I remember, just to sort of give an idea to people, I remember we were looking for a warehouse person. So they were working by themselves. And I had written, probably my own fault, but I had written that what the main requirement of the job was that they have their own steel-toed boots. That was required in our warehouse. And I remember a guy walking in for the interview, to his credit, with steel-toed boots on and Bermuda shorts and a tank top. And I was like, what is happening here? And I was like, oh, can I help you? I thought maybe he was like making a delivery and he's like, I'm here for a job interview. I'm like, not dressed like that. You're not. I was like, you need to go home and change. Are you kidding me? And he was like, it's just a warehouse job. Like I've got my steel-toed boots on. And I was like, okay. Now for me, it was a really easy decision because I'm like, I don't think you're what we're looking for. He's like, you didn't even interview me. And I'm like, if this is the effort that you're going to take to show up, I just know right off the bat, it's not going to work. But so great stories for myself later on. But I know that like hiring is such a thing that, you know, is overwhelming for people in a regular job when they're just looking for an employee, and that training process. And this is like a long story to get to a short point. But my listeners know I'm like that. That's what I love about the work that you do, is that you can get rid of that overwhelm because you're not having to do that. If you can find a company that you know, really connect with, then you sort of lose having to deal with those weird interviews and crackpot people that come, you know, that can come in. So it's one of the advantages. And then I like what you said too about like learning something different. I think that continuing education piece that you've brought that up a couple of times. And I think that's a really important question for people to ask whenever you're hiring, whether it's in-house or hiring somebody like you, is what do you do to continuously up level yourself? Because I think you can hire somebody who has 20 years experience, or you can hire somebody who has 1 year of experience and they just do that 20 times. And there's a big difference between those two. I don't know if that makes sense. My dad used to always say that to me.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And I think, you know, just kind of going back to that interview story, one thing that I've had kind of ingrained in my brain, and I try and speak this way with my team, is when I worked in corporate retail, one of the leaders I worked for at one time made a comment to me, and it's really stuck with me ever since. It's like, act in a way, or send an email in a way, create a document in a way that no matter, you have no idea if potentially the CEO of this business is either going to interact with you, read the email, see the document, like make sure that you're presenting yourself, no matter who you're talking to or interacting with, as if you're talking to, you know, some C-level executive, or I mean, you know, anyone really, but making sure that you're presenting yourself appropriately. And so that's something that I've always been really focused on. It's like, if somebody walks into an interview and is not operating in that way, then it's kind of, you just realize it's not the right fit, to kind of what you were saying previously. And then one thing we actually do on our team, and we just started all of this, but our operations manager, we've built out a learning library. And so kind of what I shared earlier, a lot of administrative work is the same, just different. So one thing that we've just recently done is we do a lot of offsite planning or event planning for offsites for leadership or different teams within organizations that we work with. And although they might be different locations, different cities, all of that along the way, a lot of the work is the same. And so we've actually built out a lot of templates and processes around that we train our team on, so that they already have that toolkit. And even if they've never done it before, they at least have that base understanding of how to do it. And then they have all of us to kind of lean into, hey, I'm having a really hard time getting to this, or, but we do a lot of that type of work to really continuously teach and evolve the team. One thing when it comes to hiring, I was having such a hard time with hiring for a while that I decided I'm going to create a community of admins, and I'm going to see if maybe I can build this community of people that maybe long-term we can just hire from. And so I started I call it my side hustle. It's called the admin community. And it's really engaging a group of admins. You know, we're sharing tips and tricks throughout the week, and how do we continuously learn. And then we're also building like a course around just like calendar, best practices, tips and tricks. And so that type of stuff, if you will, or, you know, that type of learning is when people are taking advantage of that, that's when you know they're super passionate about what they're doing and they're excited to continue to evolve. And that's really the types of folks that you want to lean into.
You had me at templates. I am like a template lover. Like, I'm like, if anything, and somebody can make something easy for me, I get super excited about it, because I find, for me, that has been one of the biggest gifts that anybody has ever given me, because I find if somebody gives me a template, even if it has nothing to do with my industry, I always can somehow find a way that I was like, hey, remember that template we saw for that fitness thing? I think I can use that and change it and adapt it to make it work for this. But I need that, initial idea first. And then I kind of go, oh, I'm going to build off of that. So I'm a huge fan of that process. Absolutely, for sure. So let's talk a little bit.
We love a template.
Let's talk a little bit about how people could go about working with you. So they've sort of made the decision. They know that they want some help. They want to sort of take that step. What is the next? Because you work with anybody, it doesn't matter. They just have to be on Earth. For now, I'll say that they have to be on Earth for now. What is the first steps that they need to take to sort of see, is this what I need? Is this the avenue I should go down?
We have a discovery process. So you can schedule a consultation with me, and we'll sit down and talk through kind of what I like to understand is a little bit about them, their background, their business. Where are they in their business? Have they thought about what they're looking to delegate? We'll talk through a lot of that. If not, I'll do a lot of sharing around, okay, you have a similar business to X client of mine, and this is what we do for them. And I'll walk through what that looks like, because we really do a lot of different work from client to client, and everyone's a little bit different. So it's nice because I have that array and that experience, that I can kind of really give feedback around how they could leverage us in a different way that would be useful to them. So we go through that. We make sure it would be the right fit. Not every client is the right fit with us. That's really where we kind of build the understanding between one another in that discovery phase. Once we get through that, if we both find that it's the right fit, and somebody is ready to move forward, it's pretty seamless from there. A lot of what I do is really matching the client with the appropriate admin. So making sure, I always use this as an example, but operational individuals and creative folks are very different. And you would never want to put a creative on an operational project, because it just would not go well. And so making sure that we're identifying people that have the right experience, the right, like communication style. Some clients prefer that certain admins are on a certain coast. If they're on the West Coast, they only want to work with somebody that's in Mountain or Pacific time. So I do a lot of that. I really vet through who would be the right fit. And then I'll come back to the table with my suggested admin that I would put on the account. And then from there, it's pretty seamless. We have an onboarding process. We walk you through it. There's questionnaires that are filled out, but we really manage most of the onboarding process for the client. We outline exactly what is needed from them, and then they have to come to the table with a few things here and there, but we really own it. And from week one, really take things off of their plate in order to kind of hit the ground running. The one thing I would say, what we do is our onboarding week is a separate week from when we start. So we really just spend an entire week of onboarding. And then typically it's like the following Monday is when we start with their package and hit the ground running. So, and that really, what we used to do was kind of mix the two together, and it went fine, but there were always things that were like lag time. So we've just found that doing the onboarding week has been a lot better. And then from there, it's smooth sailing. Some hiccups along the way, but that's life, right?
But I think that happens with everybody. And I think, what I like the most, and there's so much information that, is on your website. Well, again, obviously we'll make sure that we link to that for everybody. But one of the things that I liked the most was that it made it feel like it didn't matter, how small in your mind you think you are, because I think that's, like I had said, and I know I had brought this up a couple of times, but I think that's one of the things a lot of people struggle with, is they just go, I just don't feel like I'm big enough. I don't feel I'm big enough for anybody to take me on. I know I need the help, and I know I'm, I want the help. But I don't feel like I'm big enough. And that was one of the things I like the most about your site is there isn't that feeling there of, oh no, I have to have, because I've seen that, you have to have this many emails coming into your inbox and this many calendar appointments. And you're like, I don't ever want to have that.
Yeah, you definitely don't. You don't need a certain level of anything. And like I said, we do a lot of different things for different clients. Even like kind of mentioned, but event planning. We do a lot of travel. That's like a really big piece of our work. We actually have a travel specialist that does a lot of the travel bookings. So
like travel planning for people.
She does actual like booking. So we have a tool that we use where in the onboarding process, if somebody is looking to use travel services, we build out a preferences profile. So what that would look like is what do you like the aisle or the window? What airlines are your favorite? What airlines don't you like? All of the ins and outs of your travel preferences. Do you always book an Airbnb or do you always book a hotel? Or does it vary based on circumstance? And so we build out this profile. We use a tool called Trondon that saves everything. And then when a client has a new travel request, we have a whole process where a form is submitted. The form is sent over to Liz, and then Liz takes it from there and puts a proposal together based on what the request is. And as long as the client finds it great, she then books it all for them because we have all of their either passport, credit card info, all those sorts of things we save in 1Password. That's a tool that we use where we save everything, and she leverages that and books it all. So even just think about how much time putting together a travel, options for a trip can take. Even just that, I think really provides a lot of relief for people, especially individuals that are traveling every week, twice a week, if that, and more. You just never know. So
yeah. And I remember doing that when I was speaking. I remember going, this is ridiculous. I don't want to do this anymore, because it was a lot, especially if I was jumping around from place to place, that the just trying to figure everything out was definitely not my forte. So it would have been good at that time to have a team that was doing that, because what I used to do is I would say, okay, this, one place has booked me. So then I would have my assistant look around in the area and see if anybody else wants, because I'm already going to be there. So let's try to do more. I don't think I would have wanted to have to try to figure that all out by myself. That would have been, I never would have made it.
I mean, it's a lot of work, just all the logistics of figuring out like who's where and when, and making sure that you know how much time you need to get to the airport or to your location, to your hotel, all of those sorts of things. There's a lot of details that go into it that I think a lot of people forget about.
Well, and that's why I love, and I just want to remind people of the tip that you had of actually taking those 2 weeks and write down absolutely everything that you're doing, because I think we fool ourselves a lot. Going back to the dollars, we fool ourselves that we're going to go into a dollar store and we're going to come out only spending a few dollars. And if you're anything like me, that doesn't work. And I remember sitting down and doing that exercise and being a little bit surprised on how many rabbit holes I jumped down without realizing I was jumping down them, and going, wow, I did not realize I was taking that much time to do stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And one thing, it's so funny because, with calendar coordination, if your we have a client where we have actually 3 admins on the team that support their entire leadership team. And so can you imagine, you have 7 different leaders with all chaotic schedules, and all 3 admins, we have a shared Slack channel where hey, can you do this time at this time? But it adds up. Like it ends up being, 15, 20 minutes of just trying to figure out if you can move so-and-so's calendar all over here. And it's just chaos. And so it really does add up over time. And when you look at it, especially in a larger organization, if you're looking at, call it 7 leaders, and you're saving them how many hours a day between travel and calendar, those 2 things specifically, in a startup type of world or in a a high growth type of organization, it really allows those individuals to level up and really focus on where they need to be focusing to help the business grow. So it ends up being, I think sometimes people don't realize that it's worth the money until after they've done it for a period of time. And then they're like, I don't know how I did this otherwise.
Well, and I think that's an important thing, because I think the task of writing down how much time it takes you helps you to put the cost of having, bringing somebody on your team into perspective. Because if you don't do that, then you think, well, it doesn't take me all that much time. Like the money doesn't make sense. Like the amount of money I'm paying to have somebody do this, I might as well just do it myself. But when you actually sit down and go, that was a 16-hour day, like that was ridiculous. Helps you to realize it doesn't just take a minute, because a lot of people say, oh, it takes me like 5 minutes and I can do my emails. And it's like, no, it doesn't. But God bless you for saying that. My husband says that it only takes 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes for me to get anywhere in town. And I'm like, you've never made it anywhere in 5 minutes ever. But to him, it's 5 minutes.
So
I'll be there in 5 minutes. It's like, I'll set a timer and I'll see you in 15.
It's so funny. Like you saying that, I've actually, and I think I do this now because of how I operate with work. But even now, if I only have 5 minutes until a meeting, I'll say to myself, okay, like what can I do in that 5 minutes? And I've even started to realize, emptying the dishwasher, that really only takes me 1 to 2 minutes, but it's always one of those tasks where I dread it. But kind of putting a time with it has made me not dread it as much either. So I think it's just funny. I've even started to think about time in a completely different way now than I ever have. And while it might say it would take you 5 minutes to do something, it might take an experienced person that has a ton of efficiencies to do it in 2. So that's the other thing. And where our time tool that we do use, we actually track it down to the minute. So if we can respond to an email or look at something in a minute, we're only billing the client for a minute. We're not billing them 5 minutes. So that is one nice thing, is you don't realize sometimes how much you can get out of an hour of work when you are billing it that way. Because we do have, you kind of look at it as admin sharing almost, because our admins are working on multiple accounts. So they're kind of jumping from one client to another. And the one big benefit of having somebody like that, of working in multiple accounts, is bringing ideas from one to the other. And that's really what we do of, hey, we do it this way over here and it works really well. I think we can do it over here for you and really optimize your time. So there's a lot of like cool things that we can do that benefit the client at the end.
Well, and I think that's the key thing. And that's one of the big differences that people need to consider, because you don't get that when you just have somebody who works for you solely, because they're living only in your environment. So that exposure, like you said, that exposure of somebody having different environments can be really beneficial for your business and your growth.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that.
So what is the best way for people to stalk you on the internet, to learn more about you, to connect with you?
Yeah, we are on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. We also have a website. It is Hamilton Raye. That's RAYE.com. And you can find us there and schedule a consultation or be in touch with us, and we can connect.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and your stories and your knowledge and your tips. I think there's a lot for people to unpack and to think about, to, start moving their business up to the next level with help.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. This is great.
One of the hardest things in being in business is actually making the decision to hire somebody to help you out. And Amanda's company is one of those ones that can help you take maybe a little bit of baby steps if you're just not sure that you're ready to do full delegation just yet. So I really encourage you to check her and her team out and see everything that she has to offer. One of the areas that I needed help with was not spending so much time creating. And if you are obsessed with templates like I am, then you are going to want to visit Julia on purpose. I joined her all access VIP membership in 2001, and it has saved me countless hours in my days. The All Access Template Hub helps you to create with confidence and increase your visibility. It is absolutely jam-packed full of template toolkits and bundles for social media, course creation, marketing, coaching and client work, workbooks, planners, and so much more. Julia's thoughtful and well laid out designs ensure that there is a template waiting to take you to your next level. The best thing I love about being a VIP member is that you get access to all the new templates she creates throughout the year. It has truly been game changing in my business. So to learn more about Julia and of course all of the ways that you can access Amanda and her team, don't forget to head over to our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. Click on blogs on the left-hand side of the page. You will see this episode and all of the ways that you can start getting into connection with people that can help you get some time and some profit back in your pocket and move yourself up to the next level. So no matter what you're doing today, whether you are finally taking that leap or whether you're just figuring out how to do a little bit more on your own, make sure that you take time to have fun. Because as I always say, if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?